Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I thought I would do a video basically talking about some of the extra information we found out about the next updates. Now obviously we're starting to ramp up into kind of devlog season and all of that stuff, so we'll probably get some new information over the next few days. I'll make sure to cover it, but this one is kind of just to show the little bits that come in every now and again and looking at different ideas and giving comments on them. I'm a bit tired today, but we'll get through it, so is kind of how it is. Hopefully you've been enjoying the content over the last little bit. I am ready and raring to go for the next few months, so this is going to be a fantastic period of time. The first piece of news actually comes in for the update name, and at least from the Japanese side of things, it was actually shown on War Thunder DMM, on their Twitter, and then also on the devlog for the drones themselves. They've called it Update Age of Drones, which is a terrible name, but at the same time, there has been not exactly some great ones in War Thunder's history. I think the main thing they try and focus on is trying to, kind of make it as simple and as direct as possible, and I suppose Age of Drones does it. Might as well have called the last update Age of 4th Generation. It's basically the same vibe, it's the same idea, but sure, why not? I even thought something like droning, or just something like that would have made a little bit more sense. But no, it's Age of Drones, so you're going to have the wonderful pieces flying around the place and having a little fun. Obviously, remember though, this is a translation, so it could be something different in English by itself, but I doubt it. It's probably just going to be this. So now we go on to comments from Smin 1080p, who is a community manager, and Gromvoiny, who is part of the store team. Now, I have a lot of respect for Smin because I would never want to do his job. You could pay me $1 million a year and I would not do his job. Because basically his job is lassoing the crazies and trying to keep them in line without annoying them or without pissing anybody off. And as you may have noticed from the last few years, I'm not very good at that. I usually just kind of, try and put people in their place. But Smin does a pretty good job at it. In general, talking about, how to like talk through topics. He's, a lot more sensible than the vast majority of people who are around the place when it comes to this stuff. But it does mean that he still has to deal with the crazies every once in a while. So the best thing to do is to have a look at some of his comments over the last few days. The first one is there was a bunch of people very annoyed about the British not getting any aircraft because, of course, that hasn't been announced. He did say a comment which was basically talking about how people should kind of reserve their kind of hope for something like a top-tier fighter for Britain, meaning that it's probably not going to come this update, because, once again, Britain is in a similar scenario to a lot of other nations in the game, where they jumped or leapt very aggressively when it came to the jets that they used during the time period. So he's basically just said, look, there's no need in getting too hyped or, crazy on these things. And then what that spawned was a bunch of people getting annoyed at him because he basically told them the truth. So someone says, I'm just saying 3 years of Phantom, especially when it comes to the top of the line fighter role, is stale and boring. If that doesn't change this patch, it's going to be an incredibly disappointing update. One of the most annoying things when it comes to War Thunder is nation mains. So people who only play one nation and even sometimes only play one tech tree. Because the way that War Thunder works, and has done for many years, is each nation always gets something each update. Back in the day, back in ye olde 2015, 2016, sometimes you had updates for, nations where they just didn't get anything. Nowadays, that's a thing of the past. Each nation at least gets one thing. That's pretty much how it's gone for a very long time now. There is a few exceptions to this rule, but not many. And so when you get these people who only play like one part of the game, a very small part of the game, let's say they play top tier air and only play Britain, of course they're going to be annoyed when they don't get anything for a little bit. but at the same time, War Thunder is about the vast majority of experiences. Just because you've decided in your head that you're only going to play this one little part of the game doesn't mean that other people get forgotten about. See where the selfish idea comes in when you have a look at people like this. And Smin says, unfortunately, some nations simply used one type of aircraft for multiple decades and chose to upgrade them over time, whilst other nations like the USA or USSR went through several types in the same period. It was much the same case for Japan and the Type 10 situation, whilst other nations received their MBTs. And guess what? He's completely right. The one problem that War Thunder has is that it is tied to national history. So if your nation, the one that you really enjoy playing for some reason, whether it's nationalistic reasons, whether it's historical reasons, whatever it is, what ends up happening for you is there will be periods of time where you won't get new toys. Because in history, they didn't get new toys at that time at those specific BRs that you want to play. There's no other clearer way of saying it than that. And I don't know why this isn't getting through some people's heads, right? Because there is a simple thing that you have to do. You have to create a time machine. You have to go back in time, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and you have to somehow force these nations to either buy or build specific aircraft. So if you can do that, go ahead. But unfortunately, War Thunder's tied to history, just like the game, the game kind of has to be from what it actually introduces for each nation. And then somebody else says, compared to the MLD, the 23 MLD and the F-14A, which themselves are too good for 11.3, love value judgments. Yes, the FGR2 is most certainly towards the bottom of the pack at 11.3. It's a shame that UK isn't getting a 4th generation fighter at this patch. And Smin says, 11.3 has more than just 2 aircraft. The F-14 was the first 4th generation, being one of the closest to what we mostly already had in game, and we have 10 nations in the game. Everyone will have their time, they just can't all have it at once. And once again, that is so true, and that is why the nation main should never be listened to, because they're going to be incredibly biased about their stuff, whether it is for and against, and they're going to be annoying as all hell while having to deal with them. Because no matter what else you bring up, it doesn't matter, because all that matters to them is that one specific tech tree and that one specific time. It's like talking to a robot which only has 1 or 2 responses. It's very, very annoying. But also, the idea that stuff like the FGR2 has not been upgraded over time in the game as well. It's got a bunch more modifications. It's got a bunch more mechanics which have been added to, over the time. Go and have a look when the FGR2 was added. I'm sure there are videos out there on YouTube and stuff about them, and you can see what these vehicles look like. And then you can have a look at them now and see the progress of them. They are not the same vehicles at the end of the day. And funny enough, the British Phantoms outperformed the American Phantoms for an incredibly long time, mainly because of their radar being incredibly good compared to others. Now other nations have caught up, and now we're going into a new period when it comes to air dominance. And this is how it goes all the time at top tier. Top tier can never be balanced. We've talked about this before. There's always going to be a top dog, and there's always going to be something that people push forward. This top dog will change every once in a while, and then people will go and play different things, but the people who are stuck in specific nations because they cannot be bothered to grind out other things or flat out refuse to, will end up in the manure pit, because that's how the game functions. If the same thing was meta all the time, or if they decided to add 10 separate top tier vehicles at the same time, one for each nation, you know what would happen? There would still be a strongest out of those, and everybody would play it. Just like how everybody played the MiG-23, got an 80% win rate, now everybody's playing the F-14, and guess what? Doesn't have actually that high of a win rate compared to probably 55, 60, whatever it is, because it faces itself. Something that the MLD didn't do too much, because there was still a very solid set of American player base who was playing against it in stuff like the F-4J. So overall, he's completely right in his statements, and for some reason this stuff is seen as controversial to say. But the problem is, if you kowtow to these nutcases who only play one nation in the game, and all they do is complain about their nation not getting anything at their specific point, you are going to have a horrific time trying to sort this game out. So what's better to do is to wheel out the wheelie bin, chuck them in it, and throw it off a cliff. Two other statements regarding things that are not happening in the game. Someone asked, possibility of the Stormer receiving the LMM this patch? 8-kilometer range slower, but proxy fuse warhead. Ideal for counter UAV and heli defense. It should be easy to implement too. I'm very happy to know that people know how this game works. The answer is not this patch, but always. Suggestions are welcome. Playing, I suppose, the debater, but generally, it is true. I'm sure we'll see more stuff like that in the future, and it'll give the Stormer a little bit more of a lease of life. The Stormer is one of those vehicles that has a very high skill ceiling, but the main issue with it, as always, is it has a bit of a problem, and that problem is pretty simple. It relies way too much on ping, and not just your ping, but the enemy's ping you're trying to hit, since it actually has to hit the target instead of proximity. Also, someone asked, so if the India tech tree come to War Thunder one day, it will be a new independent tech tree or subline for Soviet? That would be very weird if it was a subline for Soviet. But anyway, the answer is there isn't a brand new nation this update, so this can be discussed in the international tree section. It's not relevant here. So, we're going to have no Finland subtree, unfortunately. That was something that BVVD talked about they're working on next year. We're working on in general. Maybe we'll see it by the end of the year, but not in the next update, which is unfortunately sad. Another post asks about subtrees, obviously since Smin said there's no new nation, and Smin said to clarify, all we reiterated was that Hungarian vehicles will deployed into the Italian tree, which has always been the case. Multiple are in the premium bunch already. Not that a new researchable line was coming, which is true. So far they've done only event and premium vehicles when it comes to the Italian tree. I'll be very surprised if they don't stick some in the tech tree at some point, but at least at the moment the case is that they're not going to do that. We'll see what the future brings though. And of course, the moment the new Italian battleship is announced, the first thing that the Italians who play Italy do is complain about how they're not getting enough things, because unfortunately it seems like being Italian and War Thunder is synonymous to being a curse. There is very much the tale of the rabid small dog when we have a look at Italy. So Italy is no longer the smallest player base when it comes to the game. Instead, it's actually Israel, which isn't a surprise since you have to research a bunch of other stuff to be able to get access to it. So well done, Italy. You are no longer bottom dog. You are second bottom dog to a nation in War Thunder which should not exist. And what you find from small rabid dogs is they never shut up. And what I found from certain members of the Italian community is their mouths, it feels like they have like one of those little wheels on the back of their head, and somebody constantly turns it at specific times and then just turns them off every so once in a while. It's as if they have very short attention spans and struggle with basic reading, which isn't a surprise if you have a look at their government. Now, when it comes to the actual question, basically it was, can we expect any new top-tier fighters for Italy this update? Italy has been suffering without a true fighter to stay with the meta for a couple of years now. Should have built some, shouldn't you? The answer was Italy received a new top-ranked fighter with the F-104S ASA in the patch before last. We gave the ASA AIM-9Ls immediately to compensate for its flight performance compared to other top aircraft, as this was the only real option for the new Italian pure fighter at the time. Past this, Italy jumps to much later aircraft, which won't be in this update, so a new top pure fighter shouldn't be expected this update for Italy. So, to be honest, there isn't many top pure fighters that exist when you think about being put into the Italian tech tree. Even stuff like the Tornado could not be classed as a pure fighter in its role for the Italians. But also, at the same time, this goes back to what Smin said before. Some nations will get stuff at some points, other nations won't, and not every nation can be top dog at once, and every nation has their little piece of the sun every once in a while, which is how this game goes. So when you have rolling updates, it improves over and over and over again as it goes. So then we have Gromvoiny. Now, Gromvoiny is much more of the fire and brimstone type when it comes to trying to deal with people. Very much more direct, and also this gets him into trouble, because many of his things can be easily misinterpreted and also easily taken out of context. And if we understand more malicious people when it comes to the community, what they end up doing is this, which is why it's very important to make sure that your statements are simple and straight to the point, which is something that Grom over the years has struggled with. And once again, he struggled with it here. The question, or the statement, of course, is I highly doubt Jet devlogs are not ready. It's just a devlog. They had a lot of time beforehand in previous months to set up a schedule, or at least a list of devlogs. It's more like Gaijin is intentionally avoiding aviation as opposed to aviation not being ready. And the answer, from Grom, is enough with this stupidity. There are no plane devlogs, because none of the models are final yet. Simple as that. You see the blogs basically in order we're getting and preparing new content. We don't have it lying around and waiting for something. Now, there's a problem with that, isn't there? And maybe you've noticed it. So, let's go through the thought process. The first thought is, okay, let's take it at face value. So, none of the stuff is ready, so therefore the devlogs can't be done, and basically they get ready by preparing new content, and it just becomes a bit of a battery farm. If this is the case, this must cause so many issues on the back end and be highly inefficient, because if you are planning, let's say tomorrow, but unfortunately not everything is sorted for tomorrow, then you've got to wait for the next day to get it done, and then that pushes back all the rest of it. Then you've got to have days off to be able to sort stuff out. Maybe the pictures aren't sorted, maybe the models aren't finished, and it just becomes a hectic mess. As somebody who works in an industry which requires efficiency, this hurts me as an individual. The idea that you could run anything like that as kind of a battery farm where if one cog in the machine fails at any time, the whole thing goes kaput, which is exactly how this is stated, that is ridiculous to me, that is, if that is true. The other way to take it is this is just a lie, which I think is more closer to the truth. Not a full lie, of course, because nobody tells full lies, they tell half-truths. And I think the way that this is written it should be kind of seen as this. It isn't fully ready, but obviously we have plans of what we're going to add to the update, and we're obviously, sorting out plans for making sure that everything is fully done up and ready to go, and once that's done, then it goes ahead. Because the way that it's written could easily be conceived as we have no idea what we're doing, when stuff is finalized, we just throw it in, which is obviously not the case, because there's a ton of models which are completely finished when it comes to these vehicles, which have been finished maybe not for months, but at least a decent amount of time. I've seen the bloody things. So it's very odd. And then, the chat back is going to be, well, they're not going to be ready for the game. And then obviously the chat back to that is it's a devlog. It doesn't have to be ready for the game. It just needs its basic characteristics, which you already know. And then it just goes back and forth over and over again. So it's a pointless conversation because the terms aren't defined. But the problem with this statement is if you are a malicious person and you want to actually run with a story, what you could easily run with this statement is Gaijin's setup on how they do things is bad because it's not efficient, and if everything falls apart, or even if one thing falls apart, the whole thing breaks. And that is a real issue. And without the idea that these things are finalized, you could basically even pull out the argument, well, some of these vehicles aren't even finalized when they hit live server. So the idea that they're finalized for a devlog is ridiculous. The F-14 wasn't ready when its devlog came out. And also the F-14 had a teaser before its devlog came out as a vehicle. Also, when it was on the dev server, the model wasn't ready. On the second dev server, the model was better, but it wasn't ready. And then on live server, it even had to go for a few tweaks there. So, like, it's a tough statement to make, this one, and it's a tough one to be able to defend, because I see how easily this could be manipulated. So in the future, when saying these things, they have to be reworded, otherwise you can take them apart way too easily, and you know people are going to use this as ammunition going forward. What's going to end up happening is people are going to turn around and go, well, you said here that, you know, nothing's finalized and everything's all over the place, and, you know, it's as if you guys don't really know what you're doing, and then you're going to have to make another ridiculous statement where you go, no, you shut up, you're an idiot, this is how it actually works, and then people are going to find contradictions in them, just like people have done in the past. It's the same thing that happens with Keo Fox over on Enlisted, where he talks himself around in circles because he's terrible at English. Apart from in this sense, Grom is good at English, but unfortunately the message can get twisted very easily because of how he writes things. And then, of course, when it comes to major minor nations, which is a completely superfluous term, it doesn't mean anything, just like how fourth generation doesn't mean anything, because there has still been no definition from Gaijin on what fourth generation even means. We just know that one vehicle is fourth generation and the others aren't. Would be lovely to know their criteria, by the way. Still waiting for that after X amount of days. But someone says, could we consider China as a major after the heli tree is released? And the answer is it's not decided by having helis or navy branches, but number of players using this nation. Currently, China has neither, but already toppled Japan from its place held for many years. So, as you can see, the Chinese population is large, that they talked about before, at least Grom talked about before, and also, there's a decent amount of them playing China. Welcome to why China was added to the game a few years ago, and why they keep adding content to it. Because a lot of people like playing it, and also because there's a lot of stuff to add. Like, it's not as if China isn't a large country now and also has its own military setup and everything, and hopefully it continues to prosper when it comes to War Thunder. It's a fantastic tree with a bunch of really interesting little intricate vehicles in it, and I've thoroughly enjoyed playing through it, even, you know, back in the day when it was a little bit more lackluster. That is the comments I want to go over. I just kind of wanted to have a bit of a tiffy, really, and just have a bit of fun. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Peace be with you. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.